Christy Lynch has asked me not to bother reading out all of the stuff that's in the magazine or in the brochure, the abstract booklet, because he wants to concentrate all his time on speaking. So just suffice it to say that Christy is a nationally and internationally recognised for his pioneering work in achieving integrated employment for people with intellectual disabilities and people with individuals with disabilities in general. So without wasting any more time, I give Christy all the time that he needs. So hand you over now to Christy Lynch.
Good morning. Is the mic working? Okay, good. It's really nice to be in Africa with Irish weather. I feel very at home. I have a lot of slides and I'm not going to use them all because I don't have enough time. And I stole this was a political party at home, this was their slogan when they wanted to be re-elected. And the slogan is, a lot done, more to do. As I look back over 25 years of trying to support projects across the world on inclusive employment for people with intellectual disabilities, we have done a lot. So I want to use a couple of stories to give you examples. You've just heard one and you'll hear more. And then I want to talk a little bit about what I think is the big challenge that faces us, particularly in the next decade. Recently, I'm the director of a parents' organisation in Ireland, and I met a young lady we've supported for many years called Lisa. I said, "How's it going, Lisa? Are we doing what you need us to do for you?" And she said, "Christy, I'm living the dream." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "I've had my job for several years." She works in a large department store. And the result of that job changed her life. She became much, much more confident, much more able. And it led her to a space where she said to her parents about a year ago, "I don't want to live here anymore. I want to move out of home into my own apartment." And they said, "We don't think you'll be able to do that." And she said, "But you told me that when I got my job, and I was able to do that." So it's an example how, and I've seen this over and over, employment can open the door to a whole new life for people when we get it right. Another young man I worked with in Peru, Eladio has 5 brothers, and he was involved in a project that I helped to set up there. And I went back 2 years later, and his mother stood up in the audience, and I don't speak Spanish, and she started to speak very fast in Spanish, and she started to cry. And I thought, oh, have I said something to upset her? And what she was saying to me was, all my life, I have worried particularly about my son with Down syndrome. Because we're a very poor family, and I worried about him. Today, she said, he is the only one of my sons who has a job because of this project. And he is now working and earning money. And he is feeding his brothers. This is what gives people dignity and respect and confidence. And the reason I'm telling the Peru story is, if you think that this is only about money, you're wrong. Because in lots of so-called wealthy countries, we spend a lot of money. But we spend a lot of money segregating people in day centres and in sheltered workshops. Why, with 30 years of data and evidence that shows that people with intellectual disabilities can go out there, can get a job, and not only do it, but do it extremely well and make an incredible contribution to the businesses. So we have figured out how to match the right job to the right person. We have figured out how to teach job coaches the skills they need to provide the right training on the job. We've actually figured out how to persuade the corporate world and governments that this makes sense. It's the right thing to do. We have Article 27 of the UN Convention, which clearly lays out where we need to go with employment. So that's all a lot done. Great news. We can all go home now because we're done, right? It's sorted. Well, no. Australia's been mentioned. I come from Ireland. I've done work in the United States. Everywhere I go, the reality is that we have a lot more to do. Because the majority, by far the majority, of people with intellectual disabilities who are adults today are not employed in the open labour market. They're not the problem. They prove themselves all the time. Employers are not the problem. Actually, government aren't the problem either. people like me, maybe we're really part of the problem. Because we're providing these old services that are, where do I need to go to make this work? That are out of date, no longer what people with disabilities want. It's very simple. When you want to know what an adult with disability wants, just ask them. They're very good at telling you. When I talk to adults, they say to me, I want to get a job. You just heard Shona say, I want to be like everybody else. Well, they don't ask for elaborate, expensive programs. They ask of us, whose governments are now looking at our budgets and saying, wait a minute, this is costing an awful lot of money, and we don't see good outcomes. We see people continuing to be segregated and not moving on into the labour market. So we're starting to come under scrutiny. And that's a good thing, because it should open up opportunities to open those doors and get more people out there into the labour market. So what is the challenge in terms of employment for people with disabilities over the next 10 years? It will be, how can we change the old ways of doing things and free up that resource in order to support more people into the labour market? We know a lot about change. As I look back over 25 years and I look at programmes and services in Ireland, I think, why haven't we done more, and why haven't we done it more quickly? Because we have the proof. And it is because organisations are slow to change. Most services for adults were set up as segregated programmes with very good intentions, but they were set up to be a certain way, and they struggle with trying to change. This is a quote I often use: there is nothing more difficult to take in hand, more perilous to conduct, or more uncertain in its success than to take the lead in the introduction of a new order of things. We've known that for a long time. John F. Kennedy: change is the law of life, and those who look only to the past or present are certain to miss the future. Be the change you want to see in the world. Change is good, you go first. As an executive in an organisation, it's quite a perilous road when you say, we're going to stop. So 20 years ago we said, we believe in inclusion, we're closing the shop and workshop. So we closed it. And then we had to figure out how we're going to find all these jobs. And we figured it out. And today we have 170 adults who have paid work in the community in all kinds of different jobs. So yes, it can be done, but it is difficult to do. Faced with the choice between changing one's mind and proving that there is no need to do so, almost everyone gets busy on the proof. I'll move on. Why should we change? I think we have a big dilemma now when you look at employment policy for people with disabilities and you look at practice. So we're good on the policy. We're good at writing the documents. We're good on getting the convention through. I have a friend who's a public servant in Ireland, and she coined the phrase, not ADHD, ADID, Attention Deficit Implementation Disorder. We have to start putting this stuff into practice. People with disabilities do not have the time to wait 25 or another 25 years for us to give them these opportunities. We've got to do it, and we've got to do it now. So the current provision, there has to be a big question mark over now. And we've got to be more focused and more determined to move services on, to change organisations. We have to be true to our values. Again, easy to talk about inclusion, rights, respect, but giving people a job and supporting people in that job over time is a way of delivering on those values. And what we need is practical action. Less talk, more action. The current provision, particularly for those of us who live in relatively wealthy countries, even wealthy countries, governments are saying this is not sustainable. There are economic problems across the world, wherever you live. And the economics of so-called developed countries, what we've done is create very expensive programs that are, in my view, out of date in many cases now. And people with disabilities and families are looking at them saying, that's not really what I want. I want to take that money and I want to do a proper job. The changing demographics. I was recently at a thing on aging, nothing to do with disability. And the speaker said, the person who will live to be 120 years old has already been born. it is likely that the person who will live to be 150 years old is already dead. And people will live much longer, but they will also live healthier lives. I was talking to a medical doctor last night, and he was talking about the recent developments with regard to HIV/AIDS, for instance. So we will find better ways of dealing with lots of the conditions like heart disease, obesity, cancers, etc., so that people live longer, live healthier. So think about that. If you're going to have people living to be 120, does it make sense that they would start work at whatever, 24, 25, and retire at 65? Who's going to pay for all this? Who's going to pay for all the rest of it? So it is a critical, from an economic and a demographics perspective, that anybody who can work and who wants to work should go to work, wherever they live. And as I said, that's not a problem for people with disabilities, they want to do it. And expectations. Thankfully, the more of this kind of thing we do, the more time we spend giving families the information and the knowledge about how we do employment, and I'm going to give a workshop later this morning on the how-to. The more families get that, they will expect a different response from people like me, from service providers, and they should. Skip some of that stuff. Strategic alliances. We need to do much, much more work with families and work together as providers. So this is not about saying providers are bad or providers need to go away. It's about saying we need to change. We need to change the relationship we have with families. We need to change the relationship we have with people with disabilities and give them the say and give them more control. And listen, not just hear, listen to what they're asking us to do. We also need to spend a lot more time with the corporate community, with the business world, because there are lots of companies who get it, but there are also lots of companies who don't yet get it. So strategic alliances with the trade union movement, with groups like the International Labour Organization, with local employers, with national employers, with multinationals, those kind of relationships we've got to build much more. Because again, a simple truth, the people who sort out employment issues are employers. They employ people. And if we don't spend a lot of time with them and get to understand what their issues are and what their needs are and how we can support them, then we will never crack this nut. Back to basics. When I started doing this 26 years ago now, I learned these things. Be driven by the person. Talk to the individual with the disability and listen to what they're telling you. Know them well. If you're going to go and try and convince an employer to employ somebody, then you need to know the person very well. Good marketing. This is all about selling something to employers. So we sell a service. We say we have people who are good employees, who will turn up every day, who will be very loyal workers, who will do the job really well, and we will also support you as a company to figure all that out. They know a good deal when they see it, but we need to market that much more than we do right now. Quality job matching. This is not about just sticking somebody in any job. If you were stuck in a job you didn't want to do, you'd leave, and you should. So how do we make sure that job coaches are skilled at figuring out with the person what is the right job match for that individual? And the provision of tailored support and long-term support. Supported employment, the strategy we use, is not the same as open employment. There are people, I have been working, I trained originally as an occupational therapist. I've been working in the field of intellectual disability for more than 30 years. And you know what? I haven't cured one single person. It doesn't go away. It's not going to go away. So we have to be committed to that ongoing and long-term support to make sure not only that people get jobs, but when they get that job, that they keep it over time by providing that long-term support. 5 minutes. Family leadership. Back home, what we're trying to do now is upskill families and get families to work with other families, not only to kind of fundraise and sit on boards, but to become experts in things like individualized planning and negotiating with service providers in terms of exactly what kind of a package or relationship you want to develop with them. I'm eating up the time and I don't want to eat the next person's time because the next person is somebody I've known here in South Africa for some years, and he's going to tell you how a job changed his life. I want to finish with the words of Barack Obama. You're probably saying, what the hell is that? Well, we do have our own language in Ireland, so it's Irish. And it's Féidir Linn. His famous slogan, yes we can. Can we have a society where people with Down syndrome expect to have a career? Yes we can. Can we have a society that they don't get on the track of segregation when they leave high school? Yes we can. And can we have a situation anywhere, everywhere, right across the world, where it is the norm, it is typical, that people with Down syndrome have fully fulfilled careers and live independent lives? Yes, we can. Thank you.